Okay, tell me your full name and where you were born.
My full name is Althea Louise Fifield Kendall, and I was born in Hawthorne, California, June 26, 1929.
Do you know why you were given that name?
My mother had read a novel, and the heroine in the novel was named Althea, and she liked the name, so she decided that she would name her daughter Althea, and that's how it came about. My grandmother wanted her to call me Carol.
Oh, I didn't know that. So, is that why my mom's name was Carolyn?
It might be.
I never thought to ask mom how she got the name Carolyn. Okay. Um, Tell me about your parents.
My parents are Rex and Lydia. My father was he did part-time work. By the time I was born, the Depression had come on, and my dad was working at a lumber yard at that time, but he lost his job, and so they decided to move out of California and go to Grants Pass, Oregon, where I grew up and graduated from high school there.
So, what about your mother?
My mother, she was a hard worker. She had 7 children, and she raised them and kept them clean and well fed, and I know she worked hard because as I grew older, I became Mama's little helper, and I learned to do housework and the handicrafts, and so I like to sew. I sewed a lot of my clothes on the treadle sewing machine that they bought when I was born.
Do you remember your grandparents?
I remember seeing them only once. Well, my grandmother I saw only once, and she passed away when I was still in high school. But my grandfather he was alone, and he was a priest in the reorganized Latter-day Saints church, and he wanted a lot of his family to join that church, but not many of them did.
Are you talking about John Ross?
John Ross.
Okay.
And when he was alone, he found it hard to live by himself, and he began to go into the pool halls, and he was still driving when my grandmother died, but he lost his driver's license because he was drinking and driving. But he they took him to the old people hospital in Salem, and he died of strokes. He had quite a number of strokes before he died.
Well, I heard he was quite the character, too. I said I heard that he was kind of a character.
Yeah, he was. he, when he would go to the pool halls, he'd usually end up in a brawl with the other people there. And he was a lovable person.
And Uncle Marshall said that he kind of couch surfed, kind of went and lived with all of his kids or relatives or whatever after his wife died. Then I think he sold his house, and then he would live with different houses that where his kids lived.
Yeah. My father had died, and my mother had remarried, and she married Daniel Clevenger that Grandpa didn't like, but he came and lived in the house next door, which belonged to Robert. Mom had put his money into buying that house, and Grandpa came to live in that house, and he was afraid that somebody was going to steal his produce from his garden, and so he'd sit up at night with his shotgun across his lap. And
That was your grandfather that did that?
yeah. And one night the shotgun went off. I don't know why. I don't think they ever found out why he shot it, but it certainly was a shock to my mother. She was afraid that he'd killed somebody.
Yeah, I could imagine. So that was a house that your brother Robert had bought?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Right next door. Mom and Dad were building a new house on their property.
Oh, and that was in Grants Pass?
And that was in Grants Pass on Pleasant View Road.
So, tell me a little bit about your brothers and sister.
Well, my oldest brother, Bob, was a problem to my mother. He wanted to be an only child, and here she kept having children, and he was not very nice to her. And then my brother Gerald, he was a good person, and when he wanted something, he'd work for it and buy it himself. So he worked as a caddy at the golf course and made some money and bought school clothes and other things. Then Merle, being a third boy, when they were hoping for a girl, he was just kind of the forgotten child, and fortunately Mom realized that he was spending a lot of time by himself and doing things that he shouldn't be doing, so she gave him more attention. And then there's me, the one she called Althea, and I was born the year that, in the month that the Great Depression started. So, and my folks moved to Grants Pass and were living in town, and my dad realized that he needed to be in a place where he could raise a lot of his own food and provide for his family. So he bought a half acre of ground out on Pleasant View Road, and it was paid for with nickels and dimes. And the man he was purchasing it from would come by every month and collect what money we wanted to pay toward owning the property. The property cost $5 for a half acre, and it was paid for. And we always had a garden, and we did a lot of canning of the food. So we were able to provide food for the family. And then there's Leslie John. He was, it's hard to describe him, but he loved his mother a lot, and he liked to spend time with her, but he wanted to be like the older kids too. And then there was Marshall. They kept having boys when they wanted a girl. Marshall was kind of like he was kind of like Mom's pet, because I think she felt that he would be her last baby, because she was getting up older and not enthusiastic about raising younger children. So then later she decided that she wanted another baby, and that's when Carolyn, my sister, was born. And I had become just one of the boys, a tomboy. And I heard my mother say to my dad, "Well, at last we have a girl." It didn't sit very well with me, because I felt that being a girl was, in a family of 5 boys, was kind of nerve-wracking, to say the least, at times. But I helped. I was 12 years old when Carolyn was born, and I was more like a mother to her than a sister, and I took care of her a lot. And she and I spent a lot of time together. Yeah.
So I know that all 5 of your brothers went into the Navy.
Yeah. Then when Carolyn was just months old, Pearl Harbor was bombed, and my oldest brother was stationed over there at the time, and Mom was quite concerned about him because she didn't hear from him for a couple of weeks. and she watched for the mail every day, but it was about a month before she heard from him. And he was all right. He hadn't been in Pearl Harbor at the time of the bombing, but he was outside of the harbor, and his ship was not armed, so they just had to sit out on the water and watch what was happening. But my oldest brother, Robert, went all through the war from Pearl Harbor to the time that the Japanese surrendered. And so he saw a lot of action in the South Pacific. And his ship was torpedoed, and 80 feet of the front of it was blown off. And so they didn't have any power, and they had to sit and wait for somebody to either pick up the crew or come and pull the ship back to Pearl Harbor. And finally it had a hole in the middle of the ship. It was big enough for 2 locomotives side by side to go through it. So they had to fill up that hole with logs from the island of Tulagi. And the natives helped them patch up the ship so it would float, and they floated back to Honolulu, where at the shipyards they had information that they needed to prepare for the ship and repair it. And they went back to Honolulu and went into dry dock, and the 80 feet of the ship had been blown off, and in the shipyard they had built a replacement part for the ship, and that was the biggest job they had to do. That was working on the USS Minneapolis.
Oh, that was his ship he was on, the Minneapolis? Yeah. Oh.
And they put the Minneapolis back in service, but it didn't stay in service very long, and they sold it to the Gillette Razor Blade Company, and they made razor blades out of the ship.
Oh, they did? Huh.
What was left of it. And so my brother was on another ship, and he stayed in the war and in the Navy until he retired, when he had been in 21 years. And he spent a lot of that time in the brig because he was always drinking a lot and fighting a lot, so he was kept out of the action.
So that kind of saved his life. His drinking and fighting saved his life.
But he was a radar operator. He was one of the first ones to train in that field. And it was a secret weapon. And he was in school and studying it when he came home on leave one time, and that he brought material to study about it while he was home, and that material was in a metal case and chained to his wrist, so he had it with him all the time. It was a secret weapon, and they didn't want it to get out. The United States had radar, and which was helped them in controlling the enemy boats and submarines.
Well, that's interesting. I had no idea.
And then
What I could do right now is take a break and then make sure my phone's got enough battery power left on it, and then we'll go back on this, okay?
okay.
Okay, we're back.
Okay.
So, what was your home like growing up? I know that you lived in Vancouver during the war.
Yeah, I was 13 when we moved to Vancouver, and my dad was a machinist in the shipyards. He was the foreman, and he worked hard, and the tools had a habit of walking out of the shipyard in lunch boxes. And so sometimes he would work double shifts building new tools for the next shift. And so that was when he learned to use his machinist training. And after the war was over, Mom wanted to stay in Vancouver. And my dad got a job at the railroad station, and the work was hard, and he was so worn down from working in the long hours in the shipyards that he couldn't handle the job, and he was just physically worn out. So we moved back to Grants Pass, to the place there.
Well, I know that he had, Mom had mentioned that during the Spanish influenza that he had contracted the flu, and that it damaged his lungs, and he ended up having asthma from that.
Yeah, emphysema.
Oh, emphysema. Oh.
And yeah, he had asthma, and he had that Spanish influenza, and his lungs were very vulnerable, and he had pneumonia almost every winter. It was just to be expected, and so he'd be taken to the hospital and recover.
Didn't he have a brother that died from that too?
My dad's brother, Harvey, had died of the Spanish influenza. And so my dad's health was not good. He always had problems with his lungs, and he smoked from the time he was almost a child. He smoked all of his life, practically.
I didn't know that he smoked.
He did.
Well, no,
And
didn't he serve in World War One?
he was in World War One, but he didn't go overseas because he got sick.
Oh,
And they gave him, he was sick with pneumonia, and they kept him from going because he had that problem with his lungs. He didn't go, he didn't see any action, but he he wouldn't quit smoking, so he just kept getting worse. He having asthma and then pneumonia. His lungs were in very poor condition. So that was another reason why they didn't send him overseas during World War One. But it was hard on him to be in poor health, and when we moved back to Grants Pass, he started doing odd jobs and landscape work, and he kept pretty busy. And then Mom went to baking pies for some restaurants there in Grants Pass, and that was the way they supported the rest of the family that was left at home. Robert and Gerald and Merle were in the Navy at that time, and then later on, Les and Marshall would join the Navy, and Marshall retired from the Navy after 21 years. And it was...
well, did she clean houses too?
Yeah, Grandma did housework for some of the people there in Grants Pass.
And she cleaned a teacher's house and then in exchange gave my mom piano lessons. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she did housework for some of the people who lived on Laundridge Avenue. That's where the upper class people, professional people lived, and she was kept busy. Mom's health was pretty good, so she was able to work.
I remember her name's Lydia, but I never knew her name was Lydia because I always heard people call her Lou or Lulu or whatever for Luella. And so, yeah, it was a long time before I realized her real name was Lydia.
Yeah.
So what, did you have a nickname growing up?
Just Thea.
Thea, short for...
And Mom called me Sal.
Oh.
I don't know why she did, but maybe she didn't want to call me Al, so she called me Sal.
Sal. That's funny. So tell me about your friends when you were growing up.
My friends?
Yeah, did you have any friends when you were growing up?
Well, when we moved out on Pleasant View Road, there were a few people in the neighborhood, few children. So we had my brothers and my sister, we all had friends in the neighborhood. It was kind of like a small community right out in our area, because there were people on Pleasant View Road who visited, and then people on Highland Avenue who were a part of that group, and we had our favorite neighbors, and the neighbors that we would help when they needed it. And there was an old couple there that took a liking to my brothers, and Mr. Wayman would let us play baseball in the field next to his place, and he always rooted for the boys, but he didn't root for me. And it made me a little bit upset with him, because he wasn't being fair a lot of the times. The boys could do anything, and he wouldn't comment on it. So, but yeah, our neighborhood was like a small community.
What was your first trip that you took?
The first trip?
I guess it'd be from California up to Oregon, right?
California to Oregon. Yeah, that was my first trip. Then I used to go over to Klamath. My grandpa would take me over to Klamath Falls, and then my aunt and uncle took me over there too, and I stayed with them for about 3 weeks when Les was born.
Which aunt and uncle are you talking about?
Uncle Johnny and Aunt Mabel.
Okay, so Grandma's brother.
And Mom was kind of hurt when I went home, because I didn't seem to know her anymore. I'd been gone for 3 weeks to a month, and that's just, Mom said that was just too long for me to be away from her.
So, what was your first car?
What?
Your first car?
Our first car.
Your first car.
George's car was a 1932 Plymouth. It was right after the war, before the auto production became such a powerful part of American life. People had money from working in the war effort, and they wanted cars, so they were repairing all the old cars they could find, and waiting for the new cars to come out.
I read that in my history class that's when people had more cars right after the war, and also they would go to the drive-ins, and that's what was creating the baby boom too, because a lot of babies were made in the cars.
That was the baby boomers.
Yep. So what was your favorite subject in high school?
I liked English and literature. I read a lot and did some writing. I'm working on project to organize the Bible and Book of Mormon so that all the writing that apply to different subjects gets sorted out and put in or compiled together in one subject. Like I want to know everything about God, and so I put that all in one chapter, and about Jesus and that in another chapter. So it will be easy to look up and learn from the Bible.
So you're dissecting it, basically. Huh? Yeah. So, what was your first job?
My first real job was babysitting, and that was in Vancouver during the war. And in the neighborhood, there were lots of toddlers and grade school children and preschool. So there were a lot of jobs. And I babysat with one little girl. She was in grade school, and I would take care of her after school till her mother got home from work at midnight.
Oh, midnight. Yeah. Didn't you have to go to school too?
School was started early in the morning. It started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we went till noon in one shift, and then the next shift went from noon till 6 o'clock.
Marshall mentioned that too. Yeah. He talked about the different shifts of school back in Vancouver. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. What was your favorite job? Was that working in the bookstore at the college, or?
Well, I worked at the hospital as a nurse's aide.
Oh, that's right.
When I was still in high school. And it was a happy place to work because people were greeting their new grandchildren and their children, and it was the veterans had been home long enough so that the babies were coming pretty fast. And I'd go to work, and there would be these women on beds in the hallway waiting to go into the delivery room. And so it was a busy time.
What, 9 months after the war ended?
9 months after the war was over.
Yeah. So, well, when you were my age, and I'm 63, what were you doing in your 60s? What were you doing?
In the 60s?
No, when you were 60 years old.
Oh, when I was 60 years old.
Well, you were retired, I'm sure.
I had... George had retired, and he wanted me to quit at the bookstore so we could travel and do things together. So that's what I did in this. I didn't get any retirement, but I had paid for retirement, and I could draw that money out So I drew it out and we paid off the last payment on our house and the house that we had built. And we were able to finish the house and be out of debt.
So you told me before how you and George met. Do you want to tell me again how you and George met?
Well, we were living on Pleasant View Road, and I was in the last months of my school. I was going to graduate the next June, and George just got back from the service. He was in the Coast Guard during the war, and he came to live with his mother, who lived across the street. His mother had a crippled foot, and so she needed a lot of help. And our neighbors, the Jordans, used to go to the Saturday night dances out in the country. Each country would have, each town would have their dances. And so we'd go to these dances, and George was going with them. But they wanted to find somebody for him to dance with, take a partner with him. So they invited me to go with them, and we lived right across the street from each other, but we hadn't met. And we got to the dance, and the couple danced off by themselves, and we stood there and said that we'd never met, so we introduced ourselves to each other. And so we danced, and I liked George. I thought he had a good personality, and he was a good dancer. But his dances were from his era of growing up. He was 17 years and 9 months older than me. So he was kind of a one-step dancer, but you dance to the music and do what you can do.
Was that in 1947?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we started going out together, and then after a while we decided to get married. And when I told Mom that we wanted to get married, she wasn't happy about it because he was so much older than me. And he had been married before. He had a son. So we eloped to Reno in October of 1947. And then we didn't go back to Grants Pass. We moved up to Vancouver, Washington, to Pullman, Washington. And we were there all of our married life. And then George passed away on July 4th, 2004. So for about 25 years now, I've been a widow by myself.
Doesn't seem like it's been that long.
It doesn't, does it?
Well, I know both of you worked on campus at WSU, but didn't you say he was selling? Was he selling Fuller brushes, or what was he? What was he a salesman for?
George was a clerk at Central Stores.
On campus, yeah.
He at that department requisitioned out all of the things that the college used, from paper to glassware and all of that. And he was the clerk there. And our years in Pullman were good.
Well, I know that he was a ham radio operator. He had his own Radio Shack in the basement. And what was his call letters?
WV7PPP.
Because I remember him saying, Papa, Papa, Papa. WV7, Papa, Papa, Papa. At like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, he would go down and talk on his regular networks where they would check the weather and what was happening in different areas. And he really liked that. He'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go down and get on his networks, which were located in Missouri, the headquarters. And so he would be on the radio at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then about 8 o'clock he'd come up for breakfast, and he'd always say the prayer over the food. And this one morning he started his prayer with, "This is Papa, 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 WB7, Papa, Papa, Papa."
I know he used to read the Daily Bread?
The Daily Bread.
He'd read it every day. And he always made breakfast, too.
Yeah.
Usually eggs. And he had oatmeal, too, didn't he?
Yeah, always oatmeal.
And he liked to listen to Paul Harvey every day.
Took a lot of vitamins.
Yep, a lot of vitamins. So I'm going to take another break. Give you another break here. Okay. What was your secret to staying together? Probably your faith, I suppose, be one thing, huh?
Yeah, I think George had been raised in in a church that his family belonged to, the Quakers, and but he didn't attend that church, and so we started going to the same church that my mother belonged to, the Reorganized Latter-day Saints Church. And so George wanted to be baptized, and the Quakers don't believe in baptism.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So he was baptized in our church, and I think our faith and belonging to the church and working in the church was one thing that kept us together. But most of all, we just wanted to stay together.
Yeah, I know you traveled a lot, and
Yeah, we traveled a lot. George liked to go on trips and see new places, and he one time we were leaving church camp and going home, and he said, just wash our clothes and put them in the suitcase, and we're going to take off tomorrow. And I had no idea where we were going, and he wouldn't tell me. Well, we took off on the trip and ended up down at the Grand Canyon. So we saw the Grand Canyon, and it was awesome.
So I know back in the very early 60s, your sister and her two little kids came to live with you and George. What was that conversation like whenever with you and George as far as Mom bringing Glenn and I up there? How did that come about?
I really can't remember that there was anything special besides I just told him that you were coming, and that was it.
Oh.
But Tim and Teresa came later, and he was okay with that. We talked it over before I told the child welfare people that we wanted Tim and Teresa. So he was good with kids, and kids liked him.
I know you told me he would be in the middle of something and I would want him to go do something, and I would talk him into it.
He would be working and you would tell George you wanted to go for a ride.
Oh.
And George would kind of put you off and say he was busy and he could do it later, but that didn't satisfy you. So first thing, he was putting away his work and loading everybody in the car, and we were taking off for a ride out in the country.
I remember going to the parks there in Pullman, playing on the equipment. I remember doing that.
Yeah. We would go to the park and we would play. One time we were at a park where they had a slide that was about 14 feet tall. And when we got out of the car, I told the kids that they shouldn't get up on that slide because it was too high, and if they fell off, they'd get badly hurt. Well, I barely turned around, and Glenn was up on top of that slide, calling and waving to me. So I stood at the bottom and waited for him to come down, but it didn't scare him, that height.
Yeah, I remember there would always be two different size slides at the parks, and Glenn and I always wanted to go for the tallest one,
Yeah.
And we'd run and try to climb up the ladder as fast as we could. We'd try to beat each other to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember you want to talk a bit about Glenn had a birthday cake, and then my birthday was 3 weeks later, and he threw a fit because he wanted a birthday cake again. And so you split the cake, so we both got a birthday cake. So I was 4, so he must have been 3.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was. I didn't realize how much competition and wanting everything to be equal, So I baked a birthday cake for Janie, and I put one layer on top of the other, but Glenn didn't have a cake, and Janie and Glenn both wanted him to have a cake, so I took one layer of cake and put it on a dish, and so they had 2 cakes, and Glenn had a birthday 3 weeks earlier, but he was still in the birthday mood, and so he was happy.
I remember when you and Mom had Glenn and I on your shoulders, and we would run around between the kitchen and the living room. I remember going around that wall that separated the kitchen, the living room, and the hallway. So I think I might have been on Mom's shoulders. I don't remember, but I just remember being on the
We
shoulders.
used to trade.
Oh, trade, yeah, and we'd be on your shoulders, and you would run around and chase each other around, or with Glenn and I on your shoulders. I remember that.
And then sometimes you'd hide behind the wall in the living room, and then you'd start laughing if we ran past you.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. And then I remember being in the backyard, and we'd gotten a new swing set in the backyard, and we liked playing on that. I liked I don't know, it was like the chairs.
Teeter-totter.
Well, yeah, the chairs.
Swinging,
The swinging chairs on it. I remember those. And that we could see the clock tower of the campus from your backyard, which you can barely see it now. I remember seeing that. And that we went up the road to Maxine's house for our babysitter while Mom worked on campus too, in the Cub, I guess it was. I remember doing that too. So, and then we had a cat, the Siamese cat. I remember the cat.
Carolyn had a job at the student union building there on the campus, and you guys went to a babysitter. Trying to remember her name.
Maxine.
Yeah. And her husband took a liking to Glenn and would play with him.
Yeah, I remember Glenn was in his shoes. He had these big boots, and he let Glenn put it on his shoes, his boots, and they came up to, his calves, or the back of his knees. They were so tall. He had boots on. And Maxine made me clothes for my Barbie. She made that. I remember I still have some of those clothes that she made.
They were the nicest people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do remember when Tim and Teresa lived with you, and we would go visit and play with Tim and Teresa when we were kids, because we were all pretty much around the same age.
Yeah.
And they talked about how they got to go camping with you, and they used to tell us that they really liked living there. And they went to the school over the hill.
Yeah, Teresa said that when they left our place, their childhood ended because their mother wanted them back so they could take care of their half brothers and sisters, the twins.
Mm-hmm.
They were the twins were left in Tim and Teresa's care a lot.
Oh.
And so, and it was just a sad time for all of us.
Yeah. Well, I do remember Teresa had the Partridge Family albums, and we used to listen to the Partridge Family music down in the basement. And then, and I do remember going to the Pullman City swimming pool.
Yeah.
And we only paid $1 to go in there, and they had the baskets that you could put your clothes in it with a clothespin with a number on it of the basket, and you could keep the clothespin on your swimsuit, and then when you're ready, you just hand them that, and they give you your clothes back. But I remember being there. We were wanting to go swimming one time on the deck, and we were on the back deck of your place, and George said we couldn't go because it wasn't warm enough. And so we were watching that thermometer trying to make it go up. And I think Tim said, let's get a mirror or something and try to get a reflection and try to put it on that thermometer to make it go up so we could tell George it was warm enough. But I think we went anyway. He let us go anyway. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny.
Well, Tim smashed that thermometer. He got so mad about that.
Oh, is that right? Well, I remember Tim taught us how to play Monopoly. And he told us, don't buy the railroads. Those aren't worth anything. And then he bought all 4 railroads and wiped us out. And then we learned from then on how to play Monopoly.
Tim was... Tim wasn't always fair and square with everybody.
He had an angle, huh?
He had an angle. It was always in his favor.
Mm-hmm.
He used to. Well, I think Teresa told me that when they went back to live with their mother, she was going to cut their hair, and Tim told Lauren, the twin, that he was going to have her give him a mohawk. But Tim wanted his brother Lauren to have his hair cut first. Well, he said he wanted a mohawk, so that's what he got. And then when Tim had his hair cut, he didn't let his mother give him a mohawk. So he always could work things to make other people look bad.
Mm. So he liked to be a teaser.
Yeah, he liked to be the one who was offensive. And he could be very offensive. But
what is it what were some of the hobbies that you did when you were growing up?
I took pictures of photography. I did handicrafts, embroidery and sewing and stringing beads and writing. And
I know that you took a painting class, and then
and
I have that.
Painting, I did that. But I didn't paint anymore after I painted that picture because the class was over by the time I finished that picture.
The dancer, yeah. And then I know that you and Mom didn't you do flower arrangement classes too, you and my mom?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I know that you two used to like to go to yard sales a lot.
Yeah, we liked the yard sale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think you were cleaning, were you cleaning houses or apartments too?
Yeah, we worked for a real estate company, and when the residents would move out of the apartments, we'd have to go in and clean up after them, although supposedly they had cleaned before they moved out.
Yeah, they probably didn't.
But the apartments were usually still pretty dirty.
What I forgot to ask you, what are some of the your favorite type of music? What's the favorite groups or singers that you like?
I like country, western, southern gospel, some classical music, and some modern music that as it comes out.
I think you mentioned you liked folk music,
Yeah,
like the Carpenters and
yeah.
Creedence Clearwater Revival. That you like
and
those?
Linda Ronstadt,
Yeah.
and the Carpenters.
Did you and George have a special song?
What?
Did you and George have a special song? Your own song for you and George?
Oh, yeah. It's, I haven't thought about it for so long you can't remember now.
Well, maybe I'll come back to you later. After I leave, then you'll remember. So, what do you enjoy now? You're still working on genealogy and things like that, or?
Oh, I try to keep it up to date, but I'm sure there's a lot of babies that have been born that I don't have any record of.
Yeah, probably.
And but
And then, what are the hopes for your family?
the hopes.
Yeah, what's your hopes for the family?
Well, I noticed after I did the genealogy and family history, the family kind of drew together and have become close, and I hope that still carries on.
Yeah, you got a lot of you sparked a lot of interest in the family history for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know a lot of the history until I went back to Missouri and realized that Grandma's family was from Missouri, and yeah, colorful life for people in Missouri. I had no clue.
I thought about it when I thought about doing the genealogy. I remember growing up, we felt like we were the only ones, just stuck off here by ourselves and didn't know where we belonged or who we belonged to or where we came from. We didn't know anything about our family history, and there was a lot of problems in my dad's family where they just didn't communicate. And then I knew some things about Mom's side of the family, but I thought I need to get into doing something for the family like that, bringing them together. We didn't know we had cousins, and we didn't know our aunts and uncles, and we didn't know much about my dad's family and his growing up. And
Well, I know that, or I'd heard that there was, after your dad's father passed away, that there was your dad was accused of taking money and moving to Oregon with it. And so his brothers and him were arguing over that, and they lost communication for a while.
yeah, they believed that my grandfather had left his inheritance to my dad, and he didn't even leave a will. So the courts took over, and I think it went to the lawyers and the judge and people involved in the situation.
So there wasn't any money left over, really.
And no, there wasn't any. It was. They got more than they. I mean, the lawyers and people that were involved, they got what was left of my grandfather's.
Yeah, they got paid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too bad. But you said something too that I didn't know, is that your father's mother, Louisa Underwood, that she died when she gave birth and had an infection, and then the baby didn't survive also, and your dad was not that old when that happened.
It was before they had antiseptics and knew about controlling germs. And apparently the doctors would carry that germ because they didn't know to wash their hands or wear rubber gloves or what. But she got what they call childbed fever, and in her uterus area, and she died, and then the baby died also.
Yeah, that must have been painful, for sure. Now, was she the one that she came over from England?
Her parents
Her
did.
parents, okay. Okay.
Yeah. In England, her parents had been innkeepers. They were called publicans, people who served the public. It was like a hotel where travelers could spend the night. And they had money because they sold what they had when they came over here. They were converted to the church when some of the RLDS ministers went over to England to preach the gospel.
So that's why they came over here, because
and that's why they came over here to be near the church headquarters.
So where did they live? What state were they in?
Well, my grandfather came, and then he waited a year till his brother could come, so there were two of them together. And it was about the time that Joseph Smith was killed, 1844. And people were moving out to Utah. Well, the two brothers spent some time in New York, like about a year or so, and then they went out to Utah. And they were my Charles Underwood was the postmaster for that area out in Utah. And he used to deliver the mail, but then he had a post office downtown where people could pick up their mail.
Do you know what town that was?
Logan.
Oh, Logan, Utah.
Logan, Utah.
Oh, okay. I've seen that name in the genealogy.
And
Well, who was in the Mormon battalion? Who was in that?
that was Levi Joseph
Fifield?
Fifield.
Okay.
He was a metalsmith. He mended wagons and made everything from wagons to jewelry, and used different kinds of metals. And he spent some time at Sutter's Fort.
I've been there.
And I've been there too, and I didn't even know about my grandfather at that time, great-grandfather.
Yeah, I had no idea. I would when I was in grade school in California, we had a field trip to Sacramento, and we went to Sutter's Fort.
Yeah. But when Joseph Levi wanted to go over the mountains to Salt Lake City, Sutter gave them a cannon, one of those iron cannons, and they had to drag that over the mountains.
Yeah.
And it's on display over by the Mormon Tabernacle.
Oh, in Salt Lake?
In Salt Lake.
Oh.
So they got over the mountains with him. And when they came over the mountains, they blazed their own trail. They didn't go over Donner Pass. And it took a long time for them to travel from Sacramento over to Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I bet. Wow. Yeah, and I was thinking about how the family came to live in Idaho, Grandma's parents, and because her mother's father fought on the north, right? And her father's father fought for the south. During the Civil War, yeah, back in Missouri and Kansas area.
That was kind of like my family. My great-grandfather, who was with the Raiders.
Oh, yeah. John Ross.
Yeah, John Ross.
Jonathan Ross, I guess it is.
Jonathan. He was fighting for the South. And he was one of the last 4 people that survived that shootout with the Union Army when Quantrill was killed.
And then...
And he went to Missouri.
And then your grandmother Luella Leddington, her father fought for the North, right? Was it Elijah Leddington?
Leddington.
Yeah. What was her dad's name? Was it Elijah?
No, Marion.
No, her. Oh, right. Okay.
As Tom's grandfather was Elijah.
Oh, okay.
No, maybe, I think they were brothers.
Yeah.
Elijah and
there was another one, and then there was Minerva, something like that. Leddington. I'm picturing the photograph of the three.
Picture of the four of them.
Yeah. But I was thinking that her dad fought for the North, and they probably fought against each other, actually.
Probably.
Yeah, because I was looking up information about where they had their battle, where they served, and what the battles and the skirmishes were, and they were both in. I believe it was in Lexington. They both fought in Lexington, so they probably were fighting each other.
Yeah.
In Lexington, because Luella was born in Kansas.
Yeah, there were a lot of families that were split. Some would fight for the South and some fought for the North. So.
Yeah, and we knew that Jonathan Ross was from Tinney's Grove, which was not too far from where the Frank and Jesse James family homestead was. And so that's how he knew them and got to be friends with the James family. And he ended up being on the Quantrill Raiders, like you said. I think so was Frank James or Jesse James. They were on there.
He traveled a lot with Jesse James, but I don't think he was involved in all of his robberies.
No,
or
I don't
any
hope
of
not.
His robberies.
I would hope not. Yeah. But was he a apothecary?
Apothecary.
Yeah.
He was a man of all trades, actually.
Sounds like it, yeah.
He had an apothecary. He was a sign painter.
Oh.
And he liked to travel. And he spent some time in South America. That was where all the renegades and outlaws went down into Mexico. And so he might have gone down there with some of the other men that were following Jesse James.
Yeah.
But my grandfather, John Ross, went to school till he was in the first or second grade. And then because his father was traveling, he had to stay home and kind of be the man of the house. So my grandfather had only a first or second grade education. But he invented things. He did a lot of things that, a person with that little education would not be expected to do.
Is he the one that invented something for the railroad?
Yeah. He was working for the railroads, and he invented a rail cutter for when they were building the railroad.
So this was Grandma's dad that you're talking about, yeah. I remember seeing the newspaper article with his picture showing the invention.
Yeah. He tried to sell his inventions, but nobody bought them.
So, but your grandma's mom, she was a midwife? So Luella, she was a midwife?
She was a professional midwife, yeah. She spent a lot of time away from home. So Mom was raised by her older sisters and brothers. And so Mom was the youngest one in the family. But and Mom had only an eighth grade education because Grandma was doing a washing and they used homemade lye soap. And she was making some of that soap and it had to cook some, and it was boiling hot, and she lifted it up to put on a shed roof so it could cool down and she could cut it in pieces. And there was ice on that roof, and the soap slid down and hit her on the side and burned her quite badly. So Mom had to stay home and take care of her. Didn't get to go to school. And Mom was intelligent, I have to say that. Mom and Grandpa and Grandma were all intelligent people, and they taught themselves to do a lot of things.
Well, I remember Grandma making her own clothes a lot.
Yeah.
She made me clothes. I think she made me pajamas for Christmas one year, and she liked to knit and crochet.
And embroidery.
Embroidery, yep. And she was a fantastic cook, especially desserts.
Yeah.
She'd make my birthday cakes with the ballerinas on top of it. And I used to watch her make fancy cakes with the roses, because she'd make wedding cakes, I guess it was. And she showed me when she was doing it how to make the roses. I never did it, but she showed me how she was doing it. I remember that. She was always busy making something.
Talented. She made the purses and she made dolls.
That's right. She made the monkey dolls and then the baby dolls and the purses. We'd go to Roseville and she'd buy the naga hide to make purses if people would place their order, and she'd make custom purses, and I still have mine that she made for me. I forgot about that until just now. So yeah, I still have a lot of my stuff packed away in a box.
She had a lot of money, but she never put it in the bank because the Social Security people would know about it and cut off their Social Security.
Yeah, she showed me her. She had me go in their bedroom one time, her and Grandpa Clevenger, and she lifted up the mattress, and it was full of money underneath there. She said, "This is where I hide the money." I'd never heard of it. People putting money under the mattress before.
Well, she liked to make money, and she was very careful about how she spent it.
Yeah, and I remember we'd go to church, and then we'd go to Kentucky Fried Chicken afterwards, and they still kept the containers.
Yeah. They liked the Kentucky Fried Chicken. When they were moving up to South Bend, Bob and George went down to get their furniture and things. And all those cartons that the chicken came in, the empty ones were tossed under their trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And Mom was upset that they didn't bring those with them. I don't know why she wanted to carry them around, but she would collect things like that.
She did a lot of canning too. I remember that. And Grandpa always had a big garden. Grandma had her rose garden in the front yard, and Grandpa had his vegetable garden in the back,
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables. But I remember she had a peach tree back there, a clean peach tree, and she'd slice the peaches and then put them in containers and freeze them. And then she'd get them out, and we'd have peaches and cream for dessert. That was good with the half and half. But yeah, she made pickles one year that were really good. They're really crispy. And then I remember them having a big flat full of cherries too. And I think Glenn ate so many he got sick. Because Mom kept saying, "Don't eat too many." And I think he ate too many. And then she liked to play the piano. She had a piano and an organ in the living room. So she played. And she liked to sing.
Yeah.
In church, she liked to sing the gospels and stuff. But she had an old record player that played the 78 speed records too, and she played that song "Down on the Bayou," I think it was. that
Crawfish pie and a jumble.
Yeah, yeah. She played that. She used to like to play those old ones once in a while. And she liked to watch Lawrence Welk. I remember watching Lawrence Welk on the TV. Grandpa always wanted to listen to the news, and she wanted to watch Lawrence Welk.
She liked soap operas.
Soap operas, yeah. And Grandpa used to say those are making her crazy. He'd say he didn't like her watching the soap operas, but Mom and Grandma both liked soap operas, and they kept up on them.
When she was in the nursing home over there in Moscow, Carolyn bought her a small television set so she could watch the soap operas. But she couldn't remember from one day to the next what had happened the day before. So it didn't make sense to her to watch those soap operas.
A lot of times they recap on a Friday. They would recap what happened the whole week. So Mom used to say she could just skip the whole week except just watch it on Friday, and she'd be able to be caught up on what was going on.
So
and Mom likes those game shows. She watched a lot of game shows too. Yep. But I do remember watching, they liked Hee Haw. Because I remember when I was a kid, I remember watching it being advertised, this new show called Hee Haw. And that was another show that Grandma and Grandpa, and they liked to watch. We watched Hogan's Heroes. She'd make Glenn and I sit on the couch and be quiet to watch TV. If Mom wasn't there, we were meant to be seen but not heard, pretty much.
yeah.
Well, I think that's probably about it. It's already 2 o'clock, so I'll give you a break. I'll